Okay, hello folks. My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. How you guys doing? We've had a lot of stuff happening lately. A lot of things in the news. Specifically today I want to talk about Super Tuesday results and the coronavirus. And I figure the best way to do that is to draw a demon. Because number one, they're easy for me. It's easy for me to draw demons. And number two, the news, I think, what's going on in the world right now can be like best illustrated by a disgusting, hideous monster. So, anyway, let's see. I'll just get started on that. Let's start with a face. Okay, it doesn't have to be exact. And let's just go up here, create a little bit of a forehead. Okay. Anyway, Super Tuesday just happened, and a lot of people out there, a lot of progressives like me, are a little disappointed to say the least. There's a lot of tearing of garments and gnashing of teeth because Bernie Sanders didn't come out as the number one undisputed champion of Super Tuesday. And but he did actually do very well. He came in, basically him and Joe Biden are essentially tied, you know. And I think the reason why, number one, that a lot of people are disappointed in this is because they kind of deluded themselves into thinking that Bernie was unstoppable, you know. Um, and it's always kind of a wake up call to people to realize that they live in a bubble. We all kind of live in bubbles, right? When it comes to this sort of thing, especially when it comes to politics, we all have our own biases, right? Let me just make this a little bit bigger here. There we go. We all have our own biases and things when it comes to politics and our individual circles that we run in, whether that's centrist, if you're a centrist, if you're a progressive like me, you know. Even though, to be honest, I'm a lot of people would probably not consider me a progressive, but I think I am. I don't know. Um, or whatnot. And you know what it is you tend to talk to all the same people and get your news from the same sources over and over. And to you, it seems logical, but you're forgetting that other people out there have different influences. They have different lives. They get their news from different sources, and they live different lives than you. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of people on the progressive left, they always get surprised when that realization comes in that, like, holy shit, not everybody thinks like me. you know. So a lot of progressive people were very, very disappointed by Bernie not just being like the out and out winner. And here's the thing: is that it's not like he got stomped or anything like that. It's not like he didn't get any delegates. He's like very close. Like the last I looked. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna do a Google search right here, and I'm gonna search for Democratic delegate count, right? And let's take a look at this. So let me move this over to this. Okay. Democratic delegate count, according to Google, has Joe Biden at 566, Bernie Sanders at 501. So it's like, that's essentially tied. You know what I mean? That's pretty much they're the same right now. If you look at everybody else got stomped. Right? In fact, it's Elizabeth Warren 61, Michael Bloomberg 53. I'm surprised that he got any, to be honest. Michael Bloomberg, Amy Klobuchar 7. I mean, pretty much everybody else got stomped. So these two guys, that's actually kind of sort of close. That mean either one of them could win. You know, whether they actually will outright or whether it's going to be like nobody has if it's going to be like what do they call it, a contested convention or whatever. Who knows how that's gonna play out. But right now, it's like it's not over for anybody, especially for Bernie Sanders. I mean, he very well could take the lead in, whatever the next, frickin' election comes up, primaries or whatever. So it's like, don't count him out. You know what I mean? But people are pissed. So people are disappointed. They're pissed. They're thinking, like, I'm going on Reddit today on, several progressive subreddits I go to, and people are like, he's over, it's done. He's over with. Just get behind Biden, shit like that. And it's like, nah, man. And here's the thing. This is what should be happening. This is exactly how it should happen, right? You should go. It should be contested. People have to go and argue and try to convince each other of how they want it to, why you should vote for our guy, stuff like that. And in the very end, we all have to compromise on somebody that maybe isn't 100% of the person that we wanted. And, you find reasons to support them. And if that person is not somebody you can support, then you don't vote. And that's how it works. And so I'm actually kind of happy. I'm happy to see that, you know, he did very well. Apparently, so the way it broke down, right, is that Biden won more states. But if you look at the states that Joe Biden won, they're like primarily in the South. So he won Virginia straight out, Tennessee, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas. So he won all of those states, right? He won Texas. But if you look at how the delegates were awarded in Texas, it's pretty much 50-50. So he won it, yeah, because he got something like 51% or whatever. But like the actual delegate counts, they're essentially split between him and Bernie Sanders. So that's basically a tie there. So you know, um, the ones that are concerning is that he won. He also won Minnesota, Massachusetts, and Maine, which were states that were the polls said were supposed to go to Bernie Sanders, and they didn't. So it's like, how did he win there? What does it mean? And I've heard lots of commentary. The Young Turks, for example, said, well, basically he didn't even like campaign there, so nobody knows who he is, right? And apparently, the less people know about Joe Biden, the better he does. Apparently, right? So maybe that's why. Um, Also, you got to remember that three candidates dropped out of the race right before Super Tuesday. So that's, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and Tom Steyer dropped out, like basically a couple of days before Super Tuesday, right? And for a lot of those people, they're like centrists. So their supporters went over to frickin' Joe Biden because he's a centrist. So, if you're a Pete Buttigieg supporter, you're probably not going to vote for Bernie Sanders, right? You know what I mean? You're going to vote for the guy that it closely most resembles Pete Buttigieg, and you know, that was Joe Biden. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I really hate to say it, folks, but we got to remember that. I mean, if you're a progressive, you got to remember that you're a minority, in the Democratic Party. In pretty much, you know, either of the two main political parties, you're going to be a minority. So, you know, even though other Democrats out there support progressive policies by a huge margin, because they do things like, universal health care has something like a 60 to 70%. At one time, I think it was 70%. It might be around 60% now, support from just everyone in the country, right? Um, but you got to remember that's not everybody. I mean, 60%, that still leaves a lot of people who don't support that for whatever reason. I mean, so you got to remember it's like, yeah, you also live in a bubble. You also have your biases, and it seems logical to you that you should support these policies. You should support environmental justice, and a Green New Deal, and universal health care. You should support all of these things, and it seems logical, at least to me. I can't really see any reason why somebody, for example, would not support a decent environmental policy. I don't see how anybody would not want to do that. Clean air, clean water, keeping species from going extinct, shit like that. It doesn't seem logical to me. Logical that somebody could be against that, right? But there are people out there who are, and that's something that we got to live with. And the lesson, I think, one of the lessons here is that don't assume everybody sees things the same way you see things, right? And another lesson is you have to be ready to fight for what you want. You know, if people are not supporting the things you want, then maybe we need to make our case better. You know what I'm saying? Like we need to go to explain to people better, right? This is why universal health care is good. You know, this is why a Green New Deal is a good thing. This is why labor unions are good. You know, and get your facts straight. Show people, okay, if you're in a union, you tend to have better, access to health insurance, and you tend to have, higher paid wages and more vacation time, and productivity tends to go up because of this. Get your facts together, right? And debate people, talk to people. See, that's another problem that the progressive left has, is that they don't like to talk to people. They don't like to engage with people. What they really like to do is shut people out. Okay, they do. Go to some progressive subreddit or something. What they really like to do is basically they like to shame people a lot. That's a tactic. Quiet down, kitty. Hang on. I gotta pick my cat up because he's just gonna sit here and meow if I don't pick him up. So say hi to the people at home. This is my mom's cat because I'm watching him for her, and he's like 15 years old, so he's all like, you know, he's all like getting up there. That's all right, Monkey. Come here. I did not name this cat. My brother named it. That's why it's named Monkey. Anyway, so if I didn't pick him up, he would just sit there and howl and make all this noise. So anyway, getting back to what we were talking about. Yeah, and that's the thing is that I think progressives really do need to learn how to engage. You know, you got to learn how to engage people. You got to learn how to explain, your position and why it's good and why you believe it, and how it can help the country, and how it can help people who believe in the opposite of what you believe. Um, and not just Republicans too, but centrist Democrats. Democrats who maybe are not ready for something like universal health care. They don't want to pay the extra taxes, right? You got to sit there and you got to tell them, okay, well, this is why it'll be beneficial. This is how you'll be paying less because you're not going to have health insurance premiums, right? You'll be saving taxes. You'll be saving money because yeah, your taxes will go up, but when you get sick, you're not going to have premiums. You're not going to have co-pays. You're not going to have limits. All of that stuff. We thought we got rid of all of that shit when it came to healthcare, right? With Obamacare, but that's all being dismantled. Okay, there's a case going in front of the Supreme Court to remove Obamacare again. I mean, you would think that we'd be done with that fight, right? I mean, what did it go to? It went to the Supreme Court like 3 times, right, or something like that. And each time they've held it up. And now what it is that, well, since Congress saw in their mighty wisdom to just get rid of the penalty, the fine for not having health insurance, they just made it zero. So now the new argument is, well, since there's no fine, that invalidates the entire law. They're trying their hardest to get rid of it. It's basically been under attack this whole time. The Affordable Care Act, right? Because Republicans hate that shit. They hate the fact that that well the real reason they hate it is because Obama basically got that passed. That's the real reason. Okay, and they want to undo that. You know, but they don't like the regulation. That's the official thing. They don't like the regulation that the health insurance companies have to sell you insurance, and it has to be good insurance. Right. They've already undone that part. That was part of the ACA also, that your insurance couldn't be in name only. It actually had to be like real decent insurance that covered things. They got rid of that. So now you can buy shitty insurance again, right? And that's already becoming a problem again. People spending thousands and thousands of dollars, right? And when they get sick, they find out their insurance is a piece of garbage that's not worth the paper it's printed on. And lo and behold, they end up paying all this fucking money. Like there was a news story I saw about a guy who thought he had the coronavirus and then went to, the hospital to get tested like you're supposed to, like they tell you that you're supposed to do, right? Turns out he didn't have it, but he ended up paying $3,000, right, just to get a test. Okay, can you that? What is that shit? That's ridiculous. Just oh, you're not sick. That'll be $3,000. The fuck out of here. Okay, can you blame anybody for not going to the doctor if that's what it's going to cost? I wouldn't go that. If I had to pay $3,000 to find out if I had the coronavirus, I wouldn't go. All right. First off, I mean, the thing is, I could probably afford it too, but I wouldn't go because fuck that. That's ridiculous. You know what? I would go when I got sick, and that's what everybody's going to do. Anyway, we'll talk more about the coronavirus in a little bit, but still, it's like ridiculous. And that's how, things like that. That's how those are the points you need to make to people. You need to explain to people, you know, these are the problems we have, right? And this is how a progressive policy, you know, can help alleviate that. Okay, that same kind of problem, people in France, in Britain, and Japan don't have that problem. Okay, and they're gonna do much better when this, when viruses like this hit. They're gonna be much better, much, they're gonna control the spread a lot easier because people are not afraid to go to the doctor in those countries because it's not gonna fucking bankrupt them. Anyway, so getting back before we move on to that, I'm kind of glad to see that, I mean, I really would have liked to have seen a little bit of a better outturn for Bernie, of course, because that's who I wanted. I voted for him, right? I'm happy to say that. One of those votes from California is mine. I usually don't even vote in primaries, to be honest. I usually don't care, right? So I was actually kind of stoked this time that, hey, here's somebody that I actually give a shit about, and I went and voted. You know what I mean? So that's kind of cool. But I think he's in a really good position, and I think that if we could help him. If you're an activist, even if you're not an activist, even if you're just a guy that posts on the internet, and like, whatever. If you debate people, if you just like to, talk to people about issues and things like that, you can help them. You know what I mean? And it's by being engaged. That's how you can help. Being engaged and explaining to people, not being an asshole. That's another thing that they're trying to do. They're trying to frame it as that like Bernie bro thing from 2016, which was bullshit and it's always been bullshit, but that's the media narrative, right? The media narrative is that Bernie supporters are a bunch of dickheads. So how do you fight that? Don't be a dickhead about it. Don't immediately call people names and shit like that if they don't agree with you, whatever. Try not to be a raging douchebag when you talk to people online, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And you could actually, and let's say you only change one person's mind. Is it worth it? Well, I think so. Okay. Well, what if everybody changes one person's mind? What if we have, you know, 5 million people and you change 5 million other people's minds? See, what if you argue with a guy online for, all this stuff and you're convincing and you got your facts down and maybe you don't convince him, but somebody else reads it and kind of gets fascinated by it and you end up changing his mind. I actually got an email like that once. This is a true story. Hey, I read about your on because I used to put out I have a blog called Why I Hate the World, right? And I actually got an email from a guy saying that, oh, I read your blog like 8 years ago, and it actually changed my mind on this, this, and this. And I was like, well, right on. That's why you do these things, okay? And so anyway, I was very, very happy to see that. Yeah, you know, that he did as well as he did, right? And I think actually, progressives in general always kind of have it tough when it comes to elections. I mean, another little thing to note. I don't know if you know, Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks was also running for Congress for the House seat in Los Angeles, and he got stumped. That sucks. He lost, so he was trying to primary Christine Smith for the House 25 primary. I think it's in Los Angeles, and yeah, he didn't really do too well. So it's like, you're always kind of like, you got to remember, like, progressives, you're fighting, you're fighting a lopsided battle. I wouldn't say one-sided, to begin with. So it's not going to be easy. It's never going to be easy, you know. But that's still, you just got to, yeah, plug at it and take your victories where you get them. And this time, I would say Super Tuesday was actually pretty good, you know. Um, and it's anybody's race at this time. One thing I was very happy to see was that Mike Bloomberg crashed and burned hard. That was fantastic because fuck Mike Bloomberg. And I guess he just dropped out. He got something like, he won like American Samoa. And then just looking at that webpage you were just looking at, said that he won something like 53 delegates or whatever, which is like, yeah, okay, you're not gonna win. Right. So I'm glad to see that he dropped out, and it's like good because that was getting kind of that would set a very bad precedent if he actually like did well and became a viable contender. That would have been a very bad thing. It would have shown that you could just buy your way into the presidency, if you're like a rich person or whatever, right? Um, which is bullshit. And I'm very, because that's essentially what Donald Trump did, although he used other people's money. Michael Bloomberg used his own money, and I think that's probably why he dropped out so quick, because he's like, okay, I just spent, he spent something like $400 million of his own money, you know, and didn't get anything to show for it. And it's like, well, you know, that's the way the cookie crumbles, buddy. I'm happy to see that that this happened and now he's gone. A few weeks ago I made a video called "Vote Blue No Matter Who." I wanted to make another one called "Vote Blue No Matter Who Unless It's Mike Bloomberg because fuck Mike Bloomberg." Right? So happy to see that he's gone and yeah, I don't know, man. The Mike Bloomberg spam was getting a little hairy. I got something like two texts from him. That was fine. Not a big deal. I was seeing lots of ads all over YouTube and shit for him. But I was actually getting real junk mail from this fucking guy. Like every single day, I would get something from Mike Bloomberg, you know? And that shit was just annoying because it's like, man, you're murdering an entire forest in order to promote your fucking stupid presidential run that you're not going to win anyway. Right? So I'm glad that he's out. It sets the precedent that, yeah, you can't just buy your way into the fucking, at least if you're a Democrat, you can't just buy your way into the fucking nomination. Tom Steyer was also a fucking billionaire too, wasn't he? Was it Tom Steyer or was it the other guy? I don't know. There was like another dude who was a billionaire. I think it was Tom Steyer. Neither of those guys got very far. So that gives me a lot of hope, that yeah, Democrats are not completely, compromised just yet. We still have integrity as a party. Or your average, a better way of putting that would be the average Democrat still has integrity. That they're not gonna just like let some rich asshole show up and fucking bribe his way into the nomination. That's what it was. And, it's like he basically was trying to recreate Trump's success. That's really what it was. And he goes, "Hey, look, here goes a rich asshole who just went on TV and acted like a fucking moron and bought people off, and he became president. Why can't I?" That's what he was basically thinking. People forget that Donald Trump's first public appearance, right, for his campaign, his very first campaign appearance at Trump Tower, he hired people to cheer for him. You know, Nobody liked his ass. Those people, like when he's coming down the escalator and shit on at Trump Tower and stuff, and those are like paid actors. Okay, people forget that shit. So anyway, are we still going here? Because Okay, yeah, that was weird. All right, I was looking at the preview and the shit wasn't moving. But anyway, so yeah, people forget that, and I guess he tried to think. I guess he thought that he could do the same thing, and I'm very happy to see Mike Bloomberg gone. Fuck him. I hope he like never runs for anything ever again. You know, $400 million blown, lit on fire. I guess it's good that we actually got it out of his bank account and into the, you know, economy where it can do some good. Think about that guy. All right, Mike Bloomberg has 65 billion dollars. I mean, Jesus Christ. That's like the budget of a country. You know what I mean? Like fucking, Paraguay and shit has a GDP of like $60 billion. Like that's how much money this fucking guy has. He could spend $1 million a day for like, 60 years and shit and not lose all his money. He could give away, right? He could give away $500 billion and still be, or 500. He could give away $50 billion, excuse me, and still have more money than like, you know, 90% of the people on Earth. I mean, seriously, like that's ridiculous. That's like more money than like Alexander the Great had. Like I remember watching a fucking documentary on that. Like Alexander the Great, is estimated that his wealth was somewhere in the area of $60 billion or something, and it's like, well, fucking Mike Bloomberg is like richer than Alexander the Great. What do you fucking do with all that money? Like seriously, you're never gonna spend it all, and the amount he spent was not even like 1% of. He'd have to spend, or 10% rather. He'd have to spend, $600 billion before that even hits 10% of his, or $600 million even before that hits 10% of his wealth. It's like he spent like not even. Oh, it's mind blowing. It's mind blowing that somebody could be that fucking rich. So anyway, so I'm not one of these guys. Just a little side note: I'm not one of these guys who says that being a billionaire is immoral. I don't believe that. I think that there are moral ways to accumulate large amounts of wealth. I just don't think Michael Bloomberg has done that. It all comes down to, well, how much do you pay your people? If your workers are compensated and compensated well, then is it immoral? I don't know. Some people would say it is because any exploitation of a worker is immoral. If you're not paying them 100% of their value, of their economic output, of their value, then it's immoral. And you go, well then, when does it become not immoral anymore? You know what I mean? How much money do you pay somebody, to where it's not exploitative? $50,000, $70,000, 150, right? I don't think anybody out there could say that if you have a job and you make, say, $60,000, $70,000, that your job is exploiting you. I don't think anybody could say that, you know. But there are some people who would say if it's not exactly 100% of the value you bring to the company, then you're being exploited. Well, yeah, maybe technically you are. Maybe you're being exploited, but it's exploited in the, most technical sense of the word. So I don't believe that at all. I believe that it is possible to have, capitalism that is not exploitative, or maybe not damaging. Put it that way. I think there is such a thing as capitalism which benefits the workers, right? Um, my wife's company, for example, they don't lay people off. I'm not going to tell you where she works, but it's a publishing company. They don't lay people off at all. They retrain people. You know, uh, if your position's being eliminated, they retrain you and move you somewhere else. You know, and if that place that they need to move you, you can't do it. You get a nice severance package. Right? They're very good about that. They have incredible benefits. I basically use my wife's health insurance because it's like really good. You know, they sponsor they have all these really cool perks and things. They sponsor trips to other offices that they have around the world and stuff like that. And it's like, I wouldn't say that she's being exploited. She didn't make as much money as I did at my latest gig, but at the same time, her benefits were way better. And it's like, no, it's not, you know, I mean, not capitalism isn't purely, the kind of thing. Like when you think a lot of people when they think capitalism, they think China, they think people in factories with like, you know, oppressive working conditions, throwing themselves off the roofs of fucking factories where they're making iPhones and shit like that, and getting paid, you know, $2 a fucking day and stuff. And that stuff exists and it's bad. And that's the kind of capitalism we should be fighting against. Okay. That doesn't mean all capitalism is like that. That doesn't mean all companies or corporations that exist out there, have those business practices, right? The problem is that that type of capitalism is far too prevalent. It's far too common, and not just in the rest of the world, but in this country as well, you know. And the reason I really think it's like that is because of Republican policies. You know what I mean? Conservative policies, right? That get rid of worker protections. The way you temper capitalism is through regulation. That's how you do it, okay? Because you got to remember, right? All these places that we on the progressive left love that want to model our country over, the democratic socialist countries that we want to model our country over, Denmark, the Netherlands, Britain, France, whatever, these places that have, universal health care and free college and that kind of thing, right? These are all capitalist countries. Okay, they're not purely socialist countries. In fact, there's only something like six, pure socialist countries left on Earth. Cuba, Venezuela, and then like fucking two other ones. I can't even name them. It's like the Cold War is over. Fucking they lost. All right, you know, um, Denmark is a capitalist country. You know, like seriously, and they have the highest, reported like happiness per person, right, in the world because they have all of these socialist programs, right? Um, they're not doing that from they're not doing that from a centralized economy that's planned or whatever. They're doing it from capitalism, right? And it's because they have regulations that stop the worst runaway effects of capitalism. You know, that's how you do it. So you have regulations that prevent pollution, right? You have strong regulatory bodies, in the government that defend workers' rights, that prevent pollution, that kind of thing, right? That stops systematic exploitation of workers. Like one thing you'll see here in the U.S., like you'll get seasonal workers that'll come from Mexico. This happens a lot in the United States. Guys will come from Mexico and they'll take their passports, right? And then basically they can't leave, and they're essentially keeping them as like slave labor. And then they take their passports and then they don't pay them until it's time for them to go back. Then they pay them less than what they agreed to, and ship them back. And there's nothing they can do about it because they're now in Mexico, so they can't fucking sue or anything. And they're not American citizens, so they're not protected by the laws that we have here. That shit happens in the United States all the time. Okay, there was a lot of that when Katrina hit New Orleans, and they brought in workers from Mexico to like help build up stuff because they were cheaper, and that shit happened. I could dig up some fucking news articles on that, but I remember reading about that. It's like, dude, like even here in the United States, that gives capitalism a bad name. That's why people hate capitalism because they see shit like that happening, right? And then they see politicians like fucking Mitch McConnell and whatever not doing shit about it, blocking fucking legislation that comes out of the House to try to stop that kind of thing, right? And then it gives it a bad rap is basically what it is. So Anyhow, I don't know. I don't know. Veered off a little bit here. Let's get back on the subject. So anyway, yeah, Super Tuesday. Shit's bad. Um, I did want to talk a little bit about the coronavirus here. Let's see. We're about 35 minutes in. We'll say if we can end this at around an hour. Um, I did want to talk a little bit about the coronavirus because I kind of resisted making a video about it because we get a lot of scares like this, over the years of different viral, outbreaks, swine flu, SARS, that kind of thing, fucking bird flu. I don't know if you remember that, Ebola, whatever. Seems like every couple of years we get another one that's like, okay, we're all gonna die, blah, 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 right? And usually it doesn't really amount to very much. Even something like Ebola. Ebola was scary as shit. Ebola is like fucking, you know, outbreak. The monkey in fucking outbreak had the Ebola virus. Right. And that shit had like a fucking 90%, death rate. Right. Even that didn't spread very far. We never saw any of that. This time, this could be a different story because it looks like this could really be pretty bad for the coronavirus. And like I said, I resisted making a video on this because I didn't want to like feed into that hysteria. But I don't know, man. It's starting to look pretty horrible. People are starting to get a little scared here, and I can totally understand why. Apparently, there's still only around there's less than 10,000 cases worldwide, which, compare that to something like the flu or whatever, that ain't shit. That's nothing. But this is just getting started. So who knows how badly it could get, right? One of the bad things about this virus is that something like 80% of people will only have very mild symptoms, right? So you may get a cough or a fever or something like that, and it won't be, or even just, a runny nose or something, and it won't be bad enough for you to call out of work, right? So apparently that's a problem because, the 20% of people that get very bad symptoms, like that's when it fucks you up pretty hard, and it's got a pretty large death rate. Death rate is hovering around 3% for coronavirus, which is way more than the flu has, right? Which is still not very much. So I mean, if you think about it, right, 1 million people get it. What's 3% of that? What, 3,000? Not even that. Okay, not even 3,000. It's more like what, 300 something. So your chances of actually dying from it are still very low. But the people that are most at risk apparently it's the same as the flu. So the elderly, infants, very young children, right? And to be honest, that those are the people that I'm worried for the most. My parents, right? My niece and my nephew. I just had a nephew who was just born recently. My little sister lives in my little sister is like, a mother now. Just had her child. And he's still an infant. It's like, well, shit. Okay, that's So those are the people. For me personally, I'm not too worried. I'm not in a I don't have pre-existing conditions. I'm not 65 or whatever. So I'm pretty sure even if I caught it, I'd probably live. And I actually have halfway decent health insurance. So, I don't have to worry about paying $3,000 if I get sick, just to go to get tested or whatever. But still, it's like a lot of people out there, man. I don't know. It's pretty bad. A lot of people out there don't have, even in this country still, even with the ACA, they don't have health insurance. You know what I mean? And if they do have insurance, it's shitty insurance, thanks to the Republicans. So you can thank Donald Trump for that, by the way, because they reversed that. That was part of the ACA, is that your insurance had to actually be effective. And people got pissed because their rates went up. And it's like, well, because the insurance you had before was piece of shit insurance that didn't actually matter, you know. So let's go ahead and I'm going to actually cut this down to like that. So crop. And you know something? We should probably, come on, crop. There it goes. Okay. We should probably save this so that, you know, my computer doesn't crash or whatever and fucking lose it, you know. Because this version of Photoshop is like old. I'm not using the latest things, so, you know, it doesn't auto-save. Right, I should probably really upgrade to the latest, you know, latest thing here. So let's put this in, let's say 2020, and we'll just call this guy Corona Demon. Anyway, there we go. So, yeah, you know, now should you be afraid of the coronavirus? Well, yes and no. Okay, so far in the United States, it really hasn't hit that bad. There's only been 11 people have died of it so far, which is nothing. That's you know barely anything, right? 10 of those cases were in um, Washington State, and apparently it's because some of those people from that Japanese cruise liner or whatever, you know, that where all the people got exposed, that's where they went. So it's like that's you know, but there's also been another reported death, and this one was in California, in Placer County in Northern California. There's been 6 reported cases in Los Angeles, you know, close to where I live, so it's down here too, right? And then some in New York, and then various spatterings around the rest of the country. But still very, very low compared to the rest of the country. You know, the hardest ones besides China. China has something like 3,800,000 cases or something, right? The other countries that it's hit really hard are South Korea, Italy, and uh, Iran. You know, Iran. You know, Iran basically. So apparently it's pretty bad in Iran. In fact, there was a video that I saw of like a government official that actually was like coughing and sneezing while he's on TV saying, "I don't have it," you know. So yeah, it's pretty bad there. There's like schools being closed and stuff in Italy, stuff like that. So, um, but you know, like they say, I'm sure you've heard this 100 times. You know, there are things you can do to, you know, prevent the spread, prevent yourself from getting it. You know, wash your hands, try not to touch your face. That's my problem. I'm always touching my face. I always sit like this or doing this or whatever. Try not to do that. You know, if you go out to a place where you're gonna touch things like, you know, a voting booth, you're gonna touch a touch screen, wash your hands afterwards. If you go out to eat, you know, that kind of thing, wash your hands before you eat. Try not to like be digging in your ears and shit and eating it and picking your nose or whatever. You know, things to be aware of. Um, you know, and one thing I want to touch on before we end this. So what have we got? 43. Okay. One thing I do want to talk about is, you know, believe the science. Okay, because right now, whenever stuff like this happens, you get a lot of wacky people saying lots of wacky things, especially in our, you know, post-truth world where most people get their news from fucking Facebook, you know. Um, and just, you know, don't believe all the weird shit you hear. Like, for example, one thing I wanted to bring up was Jim Baker, who was talking about, you know, he has supposedly the cure for the coronavirus, which was this, you know, colloidal silver solution. In fact, you know what? I'm going to play this for you guys just so that you can see this. This is Jim Baker. So if you don't remember who Jim Baker is, he's a fucking televangelist, right? Who was disgraced in the 1980s. Look up his story. The guy's a fucking snake oil salesman, and here he is selling this silver solution, right? This video is from the World Health Organization, so I'm pretty sure they're not going to block me if I show it, you know. But I just want to show this little snippet here of Jim Baker. Okay, this is Jim Baker. All right. Well, I guess it's just
This
music
influenza
anyway, but
that is now circling the globe. You're saying that silver solution would be effective.
Well, let's say it hasn't been tested on this strain of the coronavirus, but it's been tested on other strains of the coronavirus and has been able to eliminate it within 12 hours.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been tested, number one. Okay. So, it's been tested on other strains. She's lying, number one. It hasn't been tested. Number two, this silver solution shit, right, that we're looking at right here, silver solution, it's colloidal silver, right? So if you don't know what that is, colloidal, it's basically the stuff that people used to take for colds before they had vaccines, right? Before they had effective cold medicines. It's like a remedy from like the 1880s or whatever. And this stuff is shit that libertarians and like anti-vaxxers and holistic medicine types like to spout as being this wonder cure that cures everything. But in real life, what colloidal silver does is that it builds up. So the more you take it, the more the salts build up in your body, and then you get these weird like side effects, right? You get these like ridiculous like basically it turns you into a fucking Smurf person. Like this is what happens. See how this guy's like blue, you know? Right? How his skin is like fucking like a bluish gray. That's from drinking colloidal silver. Okay? And this is true shit. I'm not making this up. This is not a, conspiracy, right? These are like alternative medicine freaks who are like reading some shit that they saw in a book from like fucking 1870 and thinking that it's like a miracle cure that the fucking, you know, that the health insurance companies and medical industry is like suppressed because they want to sell you cancer drugs or whatever. And so they take this fucking toxic shit that turns them into like living Smurf people, you know. Agraria is what, basically the name for this condition, right? And it's because that shit has gotten into it. Yeah, it's because they've drank too much of this fucking toxic shit. So it's like, let me move this back over here. Right. So yeah, be careful, right, about the fucking like things that you like, believe, and be careful for the cat. Get out of here, right? You know, the misinformation and pseudoscience that's out there, especially when it comes to things like outbreaks, viral outbreaks. You know, don't drink bleach. That was another thing. People say, oh, you should inhale bleach or whatever. No, don't do that. Okay, don't fucking, I don't know, don't do any of this weird poisonous toxic shit. Like listen to the actual doctors and the actual scientists, right? And do what they tell you to do. You know, that's how you'll get through it. And when you get sick and if you think you have it, go to the fucking doctor. I mean, I don't know. And unfortunately, a lot of people won't, you know. A lot of people in this country, don't get sick leave. They don't get sick days, Um, if you're like a waiter working in a restaurant or something, I remember I used to wait tables, and it was like if I needed a day off, if I was sick or whatever, too bad, you know. Got to get somebody to cover you, and you can't find someone to cover you, then you got to go in sick, okay? And that's just how it is for millions and millions of people in this country, and that's why when the shit really hits the fan, it's gonna hit us harder than it'll hit someone someone who lives in a country with a decent and modern, health insurance coverage system. A place like Denmark, right, or Japan. They're much more like, they're going to be able to handle it a lot more because they have that infrastructure in place that we don't have, you know. And getting back to what, at the subject at the beginning of the live stream, that's one of the things you can do to try to convince people why we need things like, socialist policies when it comes to things like healthcare. That's why we need it, specifically for this kind of thing. So when you have a viral fucking outbreak, people will go get help and not have to worry about going fucking bankrupt. That's just one example. That's just one way that you yourself personally can go out there and change hearts and minds. Anyway, So it's been about an hour. I think I'm gonna go ahead and close this up. Let's see. Next video I make is going to be about the Electoral College, you know. So that's coming. And let's see. Let's look at our demon here. Yeah, it looks pretty good. You know, basically this is just a sketch. You know, maybe we'll save this and we'll work on it next time. One thing I do want to say is I have a Patreon that I don't pimp enough here, so let me just go to that, you know, and show it to all you guys. So here's my Patreon, right? And I have no patrons, but that's okay. So I'm not, you know, offering too much here, but $1 will get you an early access to a video, and then $10 I'll draw something for you. Or I will make a video on the subject of your choice. So whatever video you want me to make, if you give me $10 a month, I will make that video. You know, you want me to make it about toast fucking, where you fuck or get fucked with toast, I will make that video for you. That's cool. And then if you're a VIP guy, I have my SD store. You can have anything you want from my SD store for free. And then also all the things in the previous tiers. So anyhow, this is at patreon.com, Hoanja. I'll put a little link into it in the thing. And, you know, I figure I should probably, like, you know, tell people that I have it and stuff. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a patron, because I don't have ads, and I don't think that Google or if YouTube will ever actually give me ads. So, whatever. Anyway, I think that's all I got, folks. Thank you so much for joining me, and talk to you all later. Adios.